when I was 29 and my mom was 49, in the month we were both to become milestone ages, I was in a car with her and she said to me, Denise, life is short. She said, anybody at any time, she said, I know somebody, and they were just driving along, minding their business, and a drunk driver came across the center line and took their life. And she said, if anything ever happens to me, here's where my will. I was like, well, dude, we're not having that conversation. So I let her out. She went to pick up my sister. They drove home, and on their way home, a drunk driver came across the center line and took her life. I often tell people I died that night because who I was before then absolutely changed. I was no longer her little girl. I was now the oldest of 2 children and the person who had to settle all of her affairs. So that was the first time that grief just really punched me in the face. What I tell people is I ended up getting a therapist and it saved my life. And at that time, people were like, Black people don't get therapists. But she helped me to work through the loss of my best friend. But not only that, there were other issues I was dealing with that had nothing to do with the loss, and some did. And she helped me work through that too. 10 years later, my 5-month-old son died in a freak accident. And not only dealing with my own grief, but also with a husband who was grieving immensely, and 3 sons, ages 7, 11, and 14 at the time, trying to keep myself together as I kept them together. And because of the way that it happened, it ended up being on national news. And so somebody way across the country said, oh my God, I saw that. And what's interesting is, that was at the time of Hurricane Katrina. So I tell people I have no memory of Katrina because I was going through my own Katrina. It was a hurricane. People wrote letters to the editor saying, take the kids, the rest of the kids away from them. For something so simple as my husband that morning cooked breakfast. Everybody, I came downstairs, it smelled good. All 4 sons were at the table. But because he did that, he was running behind. So he decided to take our next to youngest home, Malcolm, to school, instead of taking the baby first, which was his normal routine. When he got back to our neighborhood, he saw this tow truck, and we were donating our car to charity. And he's like, tow truck. And there it was, and he forgot that our son was in the car. Interestingly, about 2 weeks before, I got to work, got out of the car, and I was like, Isaiah, he was in the bag. But what's equally interesting, the month before, someone had done that in Gaithersburg. And I had said, oh my God, what horrible parents. So when people started saying, what horrible parents, so trying to pull it all together, they ended up prosecuting him, but he just had community service. But I used to tell people, you can't punish him beyond the punishment that he is already taking himself through. So 2 years later, when I finally thought that I could smile, I was coming out of a basketball game for my kids, and my aunt, who was my mother's sister, who was my surrogate mom, was driving along, and somebody was drag racing, hit her, and killed her immediately. So I thought I was going to take this grief cloak off, but I put it back on. And most people didn't realize that I was grieving deeply because now I lost my mother and I lost my aunt. But she's just your aunt. But we don't grieve titles. We grieve the place that people have in our hearts. And so she was more than an aunt for me. And then 2 years after that, my husband of 18 years, my first husband, passed away, technically from sickle cell. But I believe that what he really passed away from is grief. So this idea of being able to deal with grief, because throughout my now adult life, I've had to deal with my own grief and my family's grief. And so it became so pressing to me that I said, I've got to do something about this. I've got to give people the kind of help that I needed. So I created this nonprofit called Whole Heart because I believe that when we are grieving, whether it's life or death or diversity, it's like this hole in our heart, and we try to fill it. And we fill it with everything that is not good with us. I shopped it away, I tripped it away, I did all of these things that I thought was going to bring me wholeness. But I really had to deal with the root of it and find the source that would really heal me. So that's the reason why I call it Whole Heart, because when we grieve, we have a whole, H-O-L-E. But when we do the work with you, you move towards becoming whole, W-H-O-L-E. That is the work that we do. And you never know, you see somebody walking along and they're smiling and they're laughing and you don't realize that maybe they're grieving the fact that they've just gotten this diagnosis. It could be they're grieving the fact that a parent is ill. And it's just, who do I say that to and who do I talk to? Because I'm used to being the one who takes care of everybody else. So this thing called Whole Heart is about wholeness, and that's what we're going to try to impart in you today. First for you, and then learning to facilitate it with other people.